Welcome back. Well, yes, in the data focus today, the economy, the IMF bosses visit. We're joined this morning by Mr. Olise Abakoba, Senior Advocate of Nigeria. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Well, straight away, there's some things that just kind of stick out from her recommendations about VAT. Many wonder, okay, fuel subsidy, going to those areas that people had always looked at cautiously, but looking at several recommendations, as highlighted by some of the front pages in the dailies today, what do you think we should do about some of these recommendations?
So let's start with the context. President Shagari ran the country aground. That led to a coup by President Buhari. Now, President Shagari's government was driven by supply-side economics, meaning pump money into the system. It ended up with a lot of corruption. President Buhari's policy was demand-side, manage demand, to the point where Fela was jailed for trying to leave Nigeria with about $1,000. Ridiculous. Then the IMF and the World Bank, the so-called Washington Consensus, in cahoots, believe it or not, in cahoots with our own political forces, brought in President Babangida, who adopted the structural adjustment program, which Mrs. Lagarde is preaching. That led to the institutionalization and formalization of the human rights movement. There was a big demonstration, and we all met in Gani's house and opposed it. At that time, the naira rate to the dollar was 6 at that time. And I still think that the decision by IBB to accept the Lagarde's position of the time is the cause of our present challenge. Of course, IBB was shoved out, Abacha came, and we had President Obasanjo, who I think tried to manage demand-side economics with supply side. Supply is push money into the system. Demand is managed. The only president who has tried to balance the two is actually OBJ. But he got lost in his third-term agenda. Then came President Jonathan, who returned to supply side. And that's why you had a lot of corruption. And now the mantra of this president is change. He's gone back to demand side. So the question is, do we now want to return to IMF's prescriptions in 1985? Absolutely no. The problem with Nigeria is quite simple. We don't create wealth. Do you see the Dangotes of this world in the newspapers or in your studio? Do you see Adenuga? They're making money. What the government should do is bring out the Nigerians that can make money. In my state, Anambra, it is absolutely disgraceful that you have people in Newi who have more money than the federal government. And the governor, Obiano, tried to bring them into a discussion, but failed to connect. So if you go to Newi, you will see cash pumping. But the environment for that cash pumping isn't there, because the government isn't doing nothing. So the short answer to your question is not to ask whether we need to take up, to remove subsidy. It's to say, how do we create wealth? That's the big question. How do we create wealth? Now, a guy tells you that he's a farmer. He comes to you. I'm a farmer. I have 10 children, 2,000 naira in the bank, but I have 2 million naira in my barn, yam. You will tell him, why don't you go get the yam? He will tell you, I can't because the constraints to get the yam blocks me from getting it.
Environmental factors? What kind of constraints are those?
Legal failure, corruption, bad economic policies prescribed by the IMF. But there are guys who are digging, drilling. That's why you have Alhaji Aliko digging deep, making money.
Yeah, well, some people say that,
Yes.
Sorry to divert now, but some people say that initially,
Yes.
that looking at the IMF prescriptions, there was really nothing wrong with them. That it was in the manner in which we decided to practice it that, made things go all right. That's what some school of thought say, that we did not practice it wholeheartedly. It's like taking your prescription but not finishing the dosage, or not taking it as you should, then you say it's the drugs or the doctor. Do you see it from that perspective at all?
No, but that's the wrong question. The question is, how do we make money, not economic policy? Because these very guys prescribing, the Greek prime minister at the time didn't accept it. You remember? It was a big issue when the IMF and the European Union system tried to impose conditions on Greece. The prime minister stood firm and refused, and he got his way. So when they tell us remove subsidy, how come the UK budget has £20 billion for first-time home buyers subsidy? How come the National Health Service is about 100 and something billion pounds? How come you have Obamacare? So if these guys use subsidies, why can't we? The problem about subsidy really is corruption. But are you telling me that you can't really track those guys who get subsidies on our behalf? How many are they?
Yeah, but the question is...
Why can't we?
The question is,
Yes.
Are we putting the subsidies in the right direction?
Are you asking me?
Is petrol where we should be putting subsidies?
Yes, you can do so. Whether you put subsidy in petrol or elsewhere, if you don't manage it, it will end up being corrupted.
And if you say we can, why haven't we? Because it doesn't look like you're the only one with this recipe. So why is it that...
it's the system. Because I do know that PPPRA, don't forget I served on the commission appointed by Mrs. Desani. And if I tell you, if the report is implemented, what we saw in the report was terrible. How many guys? Less than 49, 50. Less than 50. How many guys make the decisions to issue subsidies? So it is easy to locate the problem. But the problem is that there is no political will to do that. So you now blame the subsidy program rather than the implementers for getting it wrong. And then you now want to punish poor Nigerian people.
Let me take off from where Mark left off by saying that, for those who argue that the IMF policies for countries like Nigeria are fantastic, it is the way and manner the countries go ahead to manage such policies, and that's the fault. Don't you think that that's what we have seen over the years when we had the SAP, Structural Adjustment Program, and a couple of other programs by the military government in times past, and perhaps even during President Olusegun Obasanjo? No, we didn't have that with him, but in the military era, did we manage it the way they would have loved us to have managed it?
We do not need the IMF or World Bank to prescribe anything. We need to prescribe our own economic policies.
Is it the same with the president saying that he would rather look inwards?
Look, that was a brilliant answer to Lagarde. Brilliant answer to Lagarde. Said thumbs up to the president. But he has to go further and look for the money. He got it right. He said, we do not need you. He said it clearly. But what he now needs to do is to give flesh to that policy. He has to have a conversation with the guys that create money. Why is Donald Trump thumping everybody in America? You know why? He says, I create wealth. And that has resonated with the Americans. Donald Trump is the last person who I would think would be potentially America's new president. But he says, guys, I can make money. And if you allow me, I will show you how to make money. And that's what we want.
But if we say we can do this by ourselves, with some of the policies we've seen, are those indications that we can do it by ourselves?
Why do we have those policies? That would be the question. Why do we have those policies?
But you still fault the president on the trying to control the demand side of things.